Hi pals, it's Sarah. We talk about all things climate action on this channel and centered on what you can really do to help mitigate our climate crisis. But that's a really big task. Where do we even start? First, let's go back to me, because I guess the internet likes emotional vulnerability. My climate activist journey started when I was 18, and I went to Washington, D.C. for a global leadership summit. And when I was there, I realized that, wow, the world does not revolve around me, and that there are a lot of injustices in this world that we really should be focusing on. And up until that point, I just didn't care at all. And at that point, I still didn't even care about climate activism. It was fast fashion that I cared about, and the unequal treatment of women and girls in garment factories. And so when I came back from that, I started at university. I majored in international studies and marketing because I thought, wow, business, that's the answer. No. It was around this time too that I started to think about why we were eating animals, and I realized that if I can live a perfectly healthy life with no animals being consumed and no animals having to die to be on my plate, then why wouldn't I do that? So I quit fast fashion and I became plant-based. So flash forward to spring of 2018, I go abroad and study in a city outside of France, and I really fall in love with using public transportation and living a more sustainable lifestyle. And I'm taking a class called Energy and Geopolitics, where I learn about all the policy solutions that are available for a climate crisis. And at that point, I still didn't really understand what was going on with climate change. I understand that it was something that I guess we should care about, but I didn't understand the depth to it. But it isn't till late 2018 where I started getting involved in my sustainability commission on my university campus, and it wasn't until fall of 2019 that I would actually consider myself someone who's a climate activist and someone who helped plan and lead the climate strike on September 20th at my university. What I'm trying to say here is there's not one path that will get you to be a climate activist. There's no turning point where you're like, ah, yes, this is it. And most people enter the climate movement because they care about something else, whether it be immigration or injustices, as was my lens. But since you clicked on this video, you're either someone who's really interested in climate activism and has been in the movement for a long time, or you're probably someone who is really waking up to the perils of our climate crisis, the situation, and here I am to give you some resources to learn more. It's really important that we think of climate change in a holistic lens, and like I said, it's really interdisciplinary, so a lot of these recommendations are not just the science of climate change, it's more connecting climate change to the issues that we already care about. So first, with reports. I'll recommend only 2 reports here because reports get a rap for being dry and mundane and blah blah, but it contains a lot of really important information. So the first one is the 2019 Emissions Gap Report, which I made a video on too if you'd like to watch that. And I also recommend the Carbon Majors Report, which talks about the companies that are responsible for the bulk of our emissions. And if you understand the key takeaways of these 2 reports, then you are chilling on the science, and you really don't need to know much more. If you love science and you want to dig into the nitty-gritty of the greenhouse gas effects and all of that, then by all means do, but really to enter the climate conversation, I think that's the lowest bar. You just need to know that shit's bad. As for videos, I think the original film that got me interested in all of this was The True Cost, which is about the fast fashion industry, but I also recommend the Netflix documentary Inequality for All, which is by the academic Robert Reich, and he's just a really cool person to follow as well, has great views, has great information that you can understand things in ways that really affect people and not just this cloud of academia. I also recommend the film Parasite, which is a fiction film about the woes of capitalism, but there's also a really moving climate emergency sequence in the film, and I cried a lot in it, so I'm warning you. Podcasts. I love podcasts, as does, I would say, most Gen Z millennial cuspers. And a couple that I recommend are Green Dreamer by Kamea Shane, and she does a podcast that invites guests on every week and talks about the different issues in sustainability and how they are combating the climate crisis. So this is great if you really don't know what interests you yet and you're trying to get into specific solutions that you think that your skills are tailored to. The next podcast is Still Processing from the New York Times, and this is great because it connects cultural phenomenon to bigger societal kind of issues. And I really recommend their episode on straws, where they talk about, are individual actions enough? Which we also talk about on this channel. And the last one is Hot Take, which is a new podcast by 2 climate essayists, and they tackle climate communications and how we discuss climate change, which is really important, I think, and especially because that's what I'm interested in, marketing communications. But it just goes over journalism that you should read, and I think it's a really good lens once you're kind of in the movement and you want to learn more about how it's being talked about. The news. So it's important that we learn about the history of movements, but also that we stay up to date with the current news. So I recommend listening to a daily podcast like NPR to just be in the know about world affairs. I think that's pretty important to know what's going on in the world, but not to a point where you're always just worried about things, but it is nice to know what the heck is going on. I also subscribe to the GRIST daily newsletter, and that is climate specific news, and it gives you one piece of great information according to our climate crisis, and then 3 pieces of information that usually is pretty sad, but it's good to know and things that we really should be talking about. Another thing that I subscribe to that's kind of newsy is the Yale Climate Communications newsletter, and they take climate communications research and synthesize it into things that we would understand. So they talk a lot about the Green New Deal, public sentiment, voting. It's pretty American-centric, but I do think it's really interesting, especially because it's what I care about. Books, probably my favorite medium, to be honest. And I really enjoy these lists of climate reads, starting with This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein, who is the godmother of the Green New Deal. Next, we have The Ecology of Commerce by Paul Hawken, and that's really the business angle of everything. I also enjoyed Street Smart by Samuel Schwartz, and it's all about public transportation, which is my other love in life. And a climate communications one is Don't Even Think About It by George Marshall. And here are some books that are not specifically climate-centric, but I think are really interesting and good to connect to climate issues. The first is Justice by Michael J. Sandel, and it's a book about ethics and morals, but told in a way that really is accessible for people to understand, even if you've only taken Philosophy 101 or if you've never even taken philosophy. Next is Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward, and this is a fiction book about the lead up to Hurricane Katrina, which, yes, was exacerbated by climate change. So it's really interesting to get that narrative story behind the climate disasters and see it through the lens of the American South. The last one is Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, and it's a collection of essays by this renowned Black feminist, and she really talks about the intersectionality of issues, and is, I think, a really good foundational work for thinking about things in different ways. But remember, this is a linear journey, so you don't have to go out and read and do all of these things before you can even have a say in the climate conversation. It's really important that you just get involved, and like I said, as long as you know that the planet is warming and that is bad, you are more than welcome to come, and I promise you that people will be ecstatic that you are there. So wherever you are in your activist journey, I hope that these resources can help you, and if you have any other resources, please share them down below, especially books, because I'm always looking for new reads. So thank you, friends, for watching, and subscribe if you would like more information about climate activism, and I will see you in the next one, friends.